could you tell us about your beginnings in the music, how you started, just briefly, how it all happened?
Sure. So I grew up in New York City, and in a neighborhood that was very, there were a lot of artists in the community. So we had a lot of parents who wanted to make sure their kids went to music school. So there was this beautiful community music school called Third Street Music School in New York City, where we all went. And I started playing violin there when I was 4 years old. That's, you know, and then I started through the Suzuki method and studying, and then I continued formal training as a violinist and went through conservatory and etc. So, but I started composing when I was about 10 or 11 years old, when I was going into junior high school, I think it was. And so that's when the whole composing bug got started. And then it's really started to, as I was starting my professional career, after my undergrad, I was playing a lot of chamber music, and then also composing for my ensemble, which is a string quartet. And so through that process of like re-engaging with composing, I started to get really excited about it and started to, and actually Strum and Voodoo Dolls, the pieces that you guys are going to be playing, were both composed during that time, which was like, I had taken some time off from composing. And then as I was working with my professional string quartet for the first time and started writing for them, I wrote these two pieces. So yeah, and so then through that, then as that process continued, I just got more and more involved with composing as the years went on, and then that just kind of went went on and on. So
yeah. Oh, it's very interesting. That was my second question, when you started the composition, and and then the bug arrived to yourself, and that you wanted to really express yourself also with writing, not just with playing. It's very interesting. It was quite early. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I started when I was I was young, but it was like just for fun, you know. It was just something that was an extension of, I improvised a lot. I took a class on improvisation when I was young. And so that was a natural segue into learning how to compose. And
yes. That's also what I wanted to talk about. Yeah, I read, of course, online you can find many things. I read about you that you did, yes, this Suzuki method of learning instrument, and now you are also continuing in this style of teaching. Is it only Suzuki, or there was also you mentioned on your website, as we mentioned, your professor, he also somehow adjusted it. What's the difference between the Suzuki and
I think maybe you're referring to my teacher, who was my first violin teacher. She also taught improvisation lessons that were adapted using the Suzuki method principles. So really about listening and repetition.
Yeah.
So those qualities that make the Suzuki method so effective, she sort of took those elements and used them in order to teach us how to do like group collaborative improvisation. And so that is a method that I did when I was really young, and then sort of used some of those techniques in some improvisation classes that I've taught to young kids. Yeah. Recently. But yeah, so I sort of like, I use that method sort of peripherally along with other modes that I've picked up along the way. Right now, I'm not working with young kids as much as I would like, but I'm going to be starting to working at the college level starting in September. So
oh wow, very nice.
Yeah,
In Manhattan. In Manhattan, yeah.
at the new school.
Ah,
Yeah.
okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, nice. Congratulations. That's great.
Thank you.
That's
Thank
great.
you.
Yeah, it's. I'm reading and hearing about you more and more. It seems that like the whole idea of composing was came from outer impacts on your personality. Like I read many things about you being in the southeast New York neighborhood, that there were many different lower east, yeah,
Lower East Side. Yeah, that's
lower side, that there were many outside influences with different kind of folk music. Was this your only inspiration, or like influence on your composition, or you had also some maybe more classic way, like different composers?
Yeah, certainly. So certainly that experience growing up in that neighborhood is sort of, I feel like that's like the soul of where my music generates from, and it's
Mm-hmm.
that idea of like that music is a vehicle for people to gather.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and and yeah, my neighborhood that I grew up in is very multicultural.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of um, Caribbean people from specifically from Puerto Rico and Dominican Republic,
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of artists from all over the country and all over the world. And so, you know, this was just a really interesting, and a lot of like avant-garde jazz musicians that lived and worked in the neighborhood. And so yeah, so that influence, that was sort of like my family life. And then when I was studying classical music, that became my foundation for my musical training, right? So yeah, I would say that with yeah, classical music being like the thing that I've studied the most. That's really the sort of anchors a lot of the way that I think about tone color and long form music, and certainly the way I approach the violin is much very grounded in European classical tradition, and then yeah, and then all of these other elements that I have also been carrying around with me find their way into the music more. Yeah, I think yeah, I think that sort of that dialogue sort of happens pretty naturally for me.
Mm-hmm.
Or I've been more deliberate about it more recently, actually.
Mm-hmm.
But,
Yeah, it seems that that you've really found your own voice and style, which is clear from your composition. I must say that before I started to volunteer in this project, I unfortunately never heard your music.
yeah.
And although I actually studied in New York at Bard for
Oh,
5 years,
yeah.
and
Okay.
I
You know
never found.
about
Yes, yes, we will talk about about her.
her.
We'll talk about her,
Good,
and
good.
I was so surprised, and because of course I had to do some research when I wanted to create a nice program, and of course with this kind of aim to incorporate living and different composers, like not just traditional male composers.
Yeah, right.
So, and I was surprised that there are so many wonderful composers that are not played, which is very sad.
I know.
Yeah, and
Hopefully that's changing.
yeah, I hope so too.
Yeah.
And I believe it's getting better though. Yeah, but yeah, it needs time and more effort. What I wanted to say is that, yes, I can clearly hear your own voice, and it's wonderful that you already found it and you go your direction, what you want to
Thank you.
compose. That's really good. Um, we can, you can tell us already about the compositions Strum and Voodoo Dolls. Maybe you can start to talk more about Strum at the beginning. What was the process of writing? I know you kind of drew a picture how were your beginnings, but maybe in more detail what you wanted to say by the piece, etc. Yeah.
Sure. So, I mean, when I wrote this piece, I was really like, it was the first piece that my friends got. I worked for an organization that they were able to they were able to pool funds to commission me for the first time. It was the first time I ever really got commissioned.
Was it the Sphinx, yeah, organization?
No, this was,
it was later.
That was a little bit later. This was an organization called Community MusicWorks, where I worked right after my undergraduate degree. And that was where I was doing chamber music and composing for my quartet and everything. And so they asked me to write this piece because they were going to be performing the Schubert cello quintet. And actually Strum was originally written for 2 cellos, like the Schubert cello quintet, so that they could play it with all the players on the same concert. And so really, I mean, this piece sort of emerged really kind of naturally. I didn't really have a purpose in mind with it, but I started out with that pizzicato riff that goes all the way through. I simply came up with that during a quartet rehearsal. You know, when you're in rehearsal, you're not supposed to be fiddling around with your instrument, but I happened to be fiddling around with my instrument, and I thought, that's kind of cool. And luckily I remembered it, and I went home after rehearsal and I wrote it down, and I decided that I was going to use that as the motif, you know, for the piece. And then from there, I just, you know, then I started to sort of elaborate on harmonically and texturally and everything around that. The original version of it ended totally differently than the one that you guys have. It ended quietly and sort of acquiesced at the end. And so I thought, you know, I think that's interesting. You know, pieces change so much, so many different versions can exist. So in this case, and that was, I mean, it was meant to be something fun and to sort of end, I think they ended the program with it or something. And yeah, so it was really just like you know, when you're first starting out with writing, I think, or actually at any point, I think it's important to approach it from a place of just whimsy and not really knowing what's gonna come, and doing it like to find an expression of like release or an expression of just do whatever you want. You know, so very much that this piece was like that, because I really didn't know what I was doing. Like I had only just sort of, you know, started taking it seriously to compose. So I just was really kind of having fun with it. Yeah, and it took a long time to write it. It took like 6 months to write that piece. Whereas now I write pieces like whenever the deadline is, I finish it. Doesn't matter. But this, so I took my time, and it was a very nice experience.
Oh yeah, that's it sounds like it was like kind of the first composition that you created, and the process sounds very, very interesting. And I'm laughing about what you are saying a little bit, because I already did interview with John Tower.
Oh yes.
And of course, I was giving her similar questions about the composition, how she does it, and what's her system. And it's just so funny because when I asked her if she had a clear idea, because we are playing her composition Rising, it's a quintet for flute and string quartet. And then she said, "Oh, I have never clear idea. I'm always just swimming around and looking around." But it's probably, I think there is more freedom in it when you don't restrict yourself. Oh, I have to write this and that. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's not surprising that she said that. Yeah. and yet her music is so direct. I mean, it's so like the through line is so clear, you know, and the tension and the way that it kind of grows and the piece sort of comes into itself is very organic. Yeah, you can tell that she's sort of like building it as she goes, and it's just so strong. She's been an incredible influence on my.
Yeah, I was also asking her because her about you, because I read that you also met with her and probably did some classes
Yeah.
And she said that of course she follows you, and she likes what progress you are doing and what direction you are taking. So she's very happy how you are doing, and hopes that you will continue with success like this. Yeah. And what I wanted to say, oh yeah, about writing also the pieces. She was always saying that she likes to have or the compositions based on the very basic principles, yeah, like the rising. It's kind of self-explanatory, yeah, like one thing goes up, one goes down, and goes against each other. It makes tension, etc. Yeah. So yeah, of course, after the initial search at the beginning, then she really started to incorporate her kind of deeper thinking about the composition. I believe you have, after the initial start, you have also put a lot of thoughts into the strum and the voodoo dolls. My next question is, the strum, the title came after or before the composition?
After.
After, yeah?
Sure. Yeah.
How was the decision making? Did you were just
very
listening
simple.
over? Simple, yeah.
Very simple because of the strumming technique. Yeah. I like, there's something I like. I feel like my titles are either like really obvious or like totally wonder filled. Like I have one called Records from a Vanishing City, which is poetic. But it also, like, the title, like if you dig into the title a little bit, it also has a couple of double meanings and stuff. But but Strum, like, it was very simple, just Strum.
Yeah, I mean, when I heard the name or read the name for the first time, you know, I'm not native, so I had to really find out what does it mean, Strum. You know, like,
yeah, it's just like a casual use to strum the guitar. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. But it's cool. I mean, you are using before we decided for the piece, and we were ordering the music, and I was listening to it a lot. Then I just said to everyone, "Oh, guys, you better start practice pizzicato. Yeah. It's gonna hurt."
Yeah, it's true. There's something called strum pizzicato finger that you have to develop. Yeah.
We are working on it.
There's a way. I mean, you have to. I don't know, and also, like, everyone's technique is so different, and so it takes a little bit of practice.
It's my professor. He was also not only cellist but also guitarist. Very great. He was Catalan.
Oh, great.
When I played for him something and it had a lot of pizzicatos, for example, I don't know if you know Janacek, Fairy Tale.
Oh yeah.
At the beginning, like, oh, he wanted so many different fingerings for the pizzicato and ways of playing it, but then it really makes change when you explore with the pizzicato.
Absolutely. Yeah, you have to be willing to explore a little bit.
Yeah, it's not just bam bam.
Yeah. And there are backward accents that you can do to help.
Yes. It's also in the description you wrote it. The bowings for the that's great. And what about Voodoo Dolls? That's also a great title, I think. Very catchy.
Yeah, well, that one was titled because it belonged to a dance, and the dance was a suite it was a youth dance troupe based in Providence, Rhode Island, where I was living and working during that time when I wrote Strum. And the piece was a suite of movements that were each based on a different kind of doll. So Barbie doll, Russian doll, voodoo doll, marionettes, etc. And so that was like my assignment. I was assigned to do the music for this movement. yeah, and so that's where the title came from there. And then because it was based on voodoo dolls, I wanted to infuse it with some West African infused sort of spiritual, you know, sort of images and communal music, you know, associated with the ceremony that I sort of imagined, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so that's where the bop 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 bop
Mm-hmm.
bop bop
The
bop comes
rhythmical.
from.
Mm-hmm.
And then the improvisation part, I just really wanted it. I wanted there to be an element of just of freedom and like movement, you know, because it was dance, and I wanted it to sort of feel like it had, that you were, you know, stirring something up, and like, and if it's a ritual or some kind of celebration, that that it's you know, that there's an unexpected element, and you know, and so that's where the improvisation passages came in. Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds very interesting, like the background of the composing before it happened. Can the listener, besides the dances in the piece, notice also different elements of the, maybe the voodoo dolls or something, that some particular sounds that represent something?
I mean, I would say it's really just, it's mostly that drumming pattern, that syncopated drumming pattern that's underneath. That's sort of that's like the main reference that I brought in into the piece, that puts you in the mindset of a ritual, you know, and so yeah, it's really that, and I also think, I mean, one of the fun elements is like watching, like I think when you're watching the piece live, is seeing how the solos kind of go around the ensemble. And I feel like that dialogue and the way that it transfers around all the players is also is so interactive, that I, you know, I hope that sort of evokes the sense of dance and movement, even if there are not dancers there in the concert version of this, you know. But I still think that interplay between the musicians is the thing that's kind of makes it more sort of a gripping experience.
Yes. When we are practicing in now with the ensemble, they are now also, some of them, of course, they are not struggling, but thinking very much about the improvisation. Do you have some maybe technique or advice how to approach these parts?
Sure. When improvising, of course, it's important to give yourself limitations. And by limitations, I mean little small ideas and guideposts, right? And I mean, I think I put in the part a suggestion of pitches. It's just a little pentatonic, part of a pentatonic scale. And for example, that would be a limitation. You could play a whole solo just on those 4 notes. And one thing about that's really, that in the way that I wrote this, is that the groove underneath is so firm that the person who's improvising, they can go in and out of the rhythm. You know, they can go in and out of the pulse, you know, and not worry, you know, you don't have to worry so much in this piece about the pulse, because it's going to be there no matter what. And I am also a big advocate of literally like 2-note solos, 2 to 4 note solos, da 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 da, you know, in different octaves. You know, think about octave placement as a way to create variety and dynamic. And also long notes are perfectly fine. You don't have to let the texture that's fast going on be fast, and then play something in contrast. It can be slow. you know.
Mm-hmm.
I've actually, there's a really nice recording with Public Quartet. I don't know which
Yes,
record.
yes.
Yeah, right. And I think there's a part at which the soloist takes, like, just goes really slow, and then the band is playing really fast underneath. And I think that texture can be really something really nice too. So if you're feeling a little like, I'm not sure about what to do, just slow down. That's usually what that usually fixes it, is to just calm down and play slow.
Yeah, that's a good advice for basically any concert. Yeah, so calm down. But no, this is wonderful, and I think that yeah, my wife, she's gonna play the second violin, and
Oh, cool.
And a colleague from I have never met him so far, but he's from UYO member. He's gonna play the first violin, and we already talked about this, and I think this will be really valued advice from you, how to approach.
And it doesn't change. Remember, it doesn't change modes. It stays in A the whole time.
Yeah.
Right. So you don't have to worry too much about the harmonic structure. Like that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really good, because I also, of course, I believe that the guy from Slovakia, you know, we have also very strong folk music and improvisations, and I don't want that he will, I don't know, put there something totally out of.
Oh, I think I love it. I would love to. I want to hear that so much. I love the idea of the blend.
Of the blend. Okay.
Oh, yeah,
okay. So then there are not really like some restrictions about blending the style.
I would say absolutely no. I would say,
oh, cool.
Yeah. I would love to hear that. That sounds so cool.
yeah, definitely. I don't know what he will come up with, but we will do recording. We will send it to you, of course, before any release or something. So you will have the chance to hear it. Great. Thank you so much for the advice. I have a few more questions about the program. Talking more about I want to mention again the interview with John Tower. I had interesting insight from her, and I'm curious if you have similar feelings like her, because you are two different composers but wonderful, and I'm just curious what's your reaction. Do you ever have this kind of feeling of anxiety or nervousness before the very first premiere of your piece?
Oh, the worst. Yeah, okay. Of course.
Okay.
Absolutely. I get so nervous. And it's so, well, speaking of the first piece that I wrote with Joan Tower as my mentor, I cried after because I was so stressed out, and I had worked really, really, I had worked very hard and very closely with the musicians. And to be honest, when I look back, that piece has like so many weird problems, like, and it's also really kind of like derivative in a lot of ways. And you could tell I was, kind of toggling between imitating Dvorak and like trying to do my own thing. And so it had problems that are just, when you're first starting out, really awkward things. And I just remember feeling, they performed the piece like beautifully, they did a great job, but I was devastated for some reason. And it wasn't their performance. It was the anticipation, and then realizing that the piece was like something that I didn't really understand yet, even though I had done so much work on it. I think that's what it was. And anyhow, that was an extreme case. In general, now I get really nervous before the performance. It's almost like you're performing it yourself. And you're, but you're just sitting there, you're not doing anything. So It's a strange feeling. Yeah, it's like, yeah, I don't know where that comes from, but I think it's just the sense of putting something out into the world that is brand new, and yeah, and that is actually, of course, first performances are also really sort of precarious, because not all of the elements have had time to fuse together yet, by the performers, and that's just makes sense, right? But yeah, so I guess I can't help it. I don't think it'll ever go away. Just what I did learn is to go to concerts with a friend, mm-hmm. so that you're not sitting by yourself, freaked out.
Yeah,
I guess somebody.
I guess the perspective, you are like, whether you are a musician, like playing, performing, yeah. or probably apparently composer, yeah. You are right. Extremely critical, and then you are disappointed from every little thing. So I guess the support is reasonable to bring over to the concert. Yeah. Oh, that's interesting, because she was also saying that actually the piece Rising, it was interesting because she said that, of course, she dedicated the piece for Clara Vincenz, for the flutist, for her birthday. Yeah. And she managed to get such a huge crowd for the premiere. Yeah. And then when she was listening to the rehearsal and the GP, then she was just thinking, oh, it does not work together. Yeah, it does not sound so good. And then after the concert, Joan was very disappointed, yes, and she thought that it was not a good piece. But surprisingly, like, so many people came to congratulate. Yeah. It was so nice, and that they really thought that it was a wonderful piece. And according to her, it took her like 3 more concerts to
like it,
to start to appreciate what. Yeah.
Because it's so much of it is because when you're composing, right, I mean, it's like so much of it is an imagined reality, right? And so then once it becomes reality, it's still like it's shocking, right?
Yes.
And until it becomes like that you can, like, what to expect, then you can say, oh, okay, I can relax.
Yeah, it's very it's very different work to compose a music and to play music. I think many musicians don't really realize this difference. I was lucky when I was at Bard. I had to take classes of composition with Joan, and she's wonderful. And it was very, very much a deal breaker for me to really see the music from the other side. And it was so helpful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, the thing that one of the reasons that I decided to come back to composing after my undergrad was that I didn't feel I had, and this wasn't to the fault of my professors, because they taught the art of interpretation. They taught us how to think about Beethoven, how to think about Mozart, how to think about Dvorak, how to think about these composers' music based on practices that have been in the world for 100 years or more. But I still didn't feel like I knew what I was doing when I was interpreting these pieces. Like, I didn't have my own perspective on which way to go, and why to phrase something this way, why to articulate it this way. Is there, like, why is this counter melody important, and how loud or soft should it be when it comes in? These questions, I never felt like I really understood it. It always felt like an arbitrary decision based on what my professors told me. Yeah. So then I thought, well, I thought, well, maybe if I start composing myself, I'll start to get a little insight into how to interpret music better as a performer. And it's taken a long time, but I feel like I'm now a really critical interpreter. Like, I sometimes get a little bit overly creative with my with my interpretations, but I at least feel like I have agency over like my process as an interpreter, and that I can confidently approach these pieces of music with some perspective. Yeah, and so that was that I think for any performer, I think it's really important. It is a really worthwhile practice to learn how to compose. In fact, the work that I'm going to be doing at Manus is going to be, it's a program called the Performer Composer, and it's a master's program, and it's open to international students.
Okay.
It's starting new this year. And it's a program for instrumentalist composers. And so it's just sort of reestablishing this idea that a musician is neither a performer nor, you know, not one or the other, but that a musician embodies somebody who creates music and performs music on, you know, no matter what the case may be,
Yes,
you know, how they're called upon. And I know a lot of performers that do arrangements, and they'll do, you know, do arrangements of folk songs or arrangements of arias and stuff for their ensembles. That counts too, like that's a part of it. Also, it doesn't have to always be composing from scratch, but I think the act of putting like reassembling music in a different way really brings a lot of perspective to the process of interpretation. Yeah.
Yes, definitely. I agree that this kind of different perspective can really how to say it, like enrich your point of view. Yes, like not just in composition but in performance. Yeah, it's I think this is musicians are struggling. I think also that was also my struggle, to find your own voice as an interpreter. Yeah, like as an interpret, as well as composers are not struggling, but like that's their goal, to find their own voice as a composers. And kind of the approach of trying to be composer can be very helpful to really find your voice and style and whatever, like all the details, what express yourself. Yeah, that's
great.
Yeah, I think it's a wonderful program, and I hope that you will have many students, and
Yes. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's exciting. I'm excited.
Yeah, definitely. I believe it will be great. Okay, I just check the time. I don't want to keep you. I don't know what's your schedule, and we said
I have until noon at the latest, if we.
Okay. So I would like to just talk a little bit more about like the last section, which is European Youth Orchestra. You mentioned that you heard from your father about this organization.
Yes.
What exactly do you know, or?
Well, I mean, from what I've seen, it's like we have in the States, we have regional orchestras where there'll be like several states that comprise the top young musicians from that area, and then they all could come together to create an ensemble. So that's sort of my understanding of how your organization functions. Is that correct?
Well,
for college and high school.
Kind of, yeah. It's you are right. Yes, they are basically. It's a project that is trying to give young musician opportunity to like be in a semi-professional orchestra,
right?
And then have the opportunity to perform in the main venues in the world, not just in Europe. And of course, with the really good conductors. So it's focused on the orchestra playing, not really on chamber music. This year, it is a special, different project called European Music Gallery Festival. Okay. And it's because of the COVID-19, because the main tour of the orchestra was unfortunately cancelled. And they are trying to substitute this summer tour with the small chamber music concerts all over Europe. Yeah.
Okay. Wow. Yes. That's great.
Yeah, and what did you, when you heard or read your emails from your managers,
Yeah.
what was your reaction when you heard about this?
I think it's so great. It's so exciting to have. First of all, I mean, to have young people playing my music is really exciting, and also the also reaching a wide, like more wide audience,
Mhm.
and European audiences is really exciting as well, because you know it's hard for us Americans to get over the to get
It's,
over there.
yeah, you are like reading my mind, what I wrote for
Okay.
for our interview. That was my other question. Do you
Oh,
think,
that's a very leading question.
do you
Yeah.
do you think there is a disconnection between US music concerts and music world and European?
It seems like there is. I mean, and I think it comes from, you know, it's the way that our classical music field is set up, right, in terms of like the management institutions. And it's
Yeah.
like you have American management and then you have European management, and never the twain shall meet, right?
Oh,
So,
yeah.
and yeah, and so in that way, I think I hope that this strange circumstance of us being online actually helps
Mhm.
us all to gain more knowledge of composers on either side of the Atlantic, and globally. But I think I hope that this, you know, allows us to just discover more composers and more
Yeah.
music, because I have to be honest with you, I'm really not up. I'm not up to par on the young, vibrant European composers right now. I have a lot to educate myself on who to listen to. But
It's
yeah, so it's interesting. Yeah, and I think I'm just excited about.
Yeah, I'm very happy that I bumped to your website, and it
Yeah,
was like such a nice coincidence. And believe me,
yeah,
your music I really liked very much, and it was like obvious choice to incorporate your works in the program because I think there is a lot to offer for the audience, especially in Slovakia and maybe the Eastern European countries. And so I'm very happy that that I found your compositions. What I wanted to look at, when you are talking, I have so many ideas, and then I look at the paper what I still would like to talk. Oh, I just wanted to mention that this kind of disconnection I noticed also when I arrived to New York.
mm,
It's just like two different worlds. Like in the US, they don't know about the music in say in Europe about even the musicians, and vice versa. Yeah, and
yep,
this is very sad because in USA there are so many wonderful composers, musicians, and it's different. It is a different way of playing and
mm-hmm,
interpretation. Yeah, it is.
yeah.
It is, and I think at least it's my opinion that the diversity and the blend of the cultures, I think it can elevate the end result so well.
I would agree. I would
Yeah.
agree. I absolutely agree. Yeah, I think. I mean, and also, yeah, that issue of stylistic difference is something that that yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I think you just have to put the two more together, I guess, and see what happens. I mean, whereas you know, here in the States, we get like so many other things, we get criticized for being like very brazen and having a very direct kind of approach to sound um, and phrasing, and it's a little like in your face. Um, but the music can, I you know, I would argue that that perspective is something that's valuable, in terms of, because it's art. I mean, we're not hurting anybody, right? We're just creating art. So you know, I think that having that perspective is something that, you know, I certainly, when I think of classical music and I think of orchestras and I think of how to um, like the way that I use the elements of classical music in my music, um, I think of it in that context, you know, in this sort of like stylistic, American stylistic context maybe. And especially when I think of orchestration. And for me, that just is what it is. But yeah, I don't know if this answers any questions, but I think it's, I think that in the end, I think it's the differences are to be observed and to not have an attachment to it. Like people are so attached to my way and this has to be this way, but to look at it for what it is, because there's a lot of information and beauty, and also just like context, like a lot of interesting context that can be drawn from looking at the different styles. And so I think, I love the idea of blending, two, styles of performing. I mean, I get, anytime I've ever played in a chamber ensemble, like for example, something so simple as someone who plays with a different bow technique than me, suddenly we have a different sound. Suddenly I'm trying something different with my bow that I would never try before, and now the sound is doing something different, and that is how we create like more of what we want, right? More. We need more.
Yeah, that's right. Oh wow, it's so nice what you are talking, and I'm very happy that about your spirit and like intentions with your music. It's really wonderful. Let me to ask one last question about the whole project. I just want to. I prepared it, so I will kind of read it. Yeah.
Sure.
Okay, so European Youth Orchestra. It's kind of based on the fundamental values of European Union, which are, diversity, unity, and especially equality. With this project this year, the European Music Gallery Festival, we are trying to address the kind of problem of equality in gender-wise, and especially ethnicity. Yeah, that's what's going on right now in the US. That was basically my initial reaction and the opportunity to participate in this, in the organization, to really bring and maybe show a little bit of solidarity. European Youth Orchestra, it has solidarity for the whole events that are going on with the Black Lives Matters and all the protests and what's going on there. So we wanted to incorporate in the program more female composers, maybe diverse ethnicity, that we would bring these programs and this cultural beautiful differences to the countries like Slovakia. Yeah. They have never heard Joan Tower. They have never heard you. And I think this is like, they are missing so much. And I think it's going to be wonderful. I mean, even my colleagues did not know about these pieces, and they did not they live in Slovakia. They did not really feel attached to this problem, which is interesting because it's international problem. Yeah,
absolutely.
And we should all, we are musicians, as you said. Music does not harm.
Yeah,
we can at least address these problems with nice concerts and solidarity presentation by playing different composers for very traditional audience.
wow.
My question is, do you think these kind of projects are helpful, and if they should be more often organized?
Yeah, I absolutely think that these programs are necessary, and I think it's the best. Okay, I'll say even here, even in the United States, I've over the past 8 years, I was a member of the Catalyst Quartet, and our goal within the Catalyst, one of our goals within the Catalyst Quartet was to premiere and perform works by underrepresented composers, and also unknown composers, like people that don't have their music as performed as often. But pieces that we felt really attracted to, right? So it wasn't an arbitrary choice. We found these pieces and really felt connected to them. And we played them for traditional audiences. We were told by our managers and by the presenter, like, oh, our audience is not gonna like this. We are used to this one thing, you know, and what you're doing, I can't imagine it's gonna go well. And we had to insist on certain programming, like, and convince them that it was gonna work. And I tell you, every single time they were revived. The audiences were like, oh, wow, something, I didn't know I was gonna like this. I was ready to hate it. I was ready, you know? And again, music is, you're sitting there and you're captive. I mean, for lack of a better word, you're sitting there and it's something that's meant to, you know, enlighten you and revive you and to be pleasurable in some way. And we were very selective about the kinds of pieces that we picked, and that it had a, you know, a sense of journey throughout the program. And just that in itself created a way for the audiences to connect in a way that they weren't expecting. And so, you know, we like to think that that we're sort of introducing these audiences to new music in a way that is, in a way that's very meaningful, and hopefully creates some kind of change in people's attitude, right? And so I really do think that the idea of solidarity movements and highlighting different kinds of voices is very important in this point. I mean, going out in the streets and protesting is one way, and then creating environments of embracing is another way. And I think the way that that what you guys are doing with the European Youth Orchestra and the philosophy behind that is exactly what we need. And I really am appreciative that you're looking to American composers and to bring, you know, the excellent quality that's living here to Europe. I think that's really meaningful. And I think, and that's where we are in the world, right? Like, we're trying to make sure that people are aware that the art form that we love so dear is still being carried on. It might, and it's being carried on with voices and people that you might not have paid attention to before. And it's being carried on, like, with a lot of spirit and with a lot of dedication and precision. And it's exciting. And, you know, hopefully, like, the more that we admit that and allow to embrace all of those artists, then the better. I mean, we're just going to have a better experience overall. So I think it's great.
That's I think what you just said is very nice, and I'm really confident that it will be helpful for many people that are going to listen to whatever promo video the team in EUYO will create from all the interviews we are doing. And I'm very grateful that we could talk today together.
Yes,
thank you so much.